I'm very glad to be here today. We are going to be spending some time talking about engagement and employee engagement, obviously the link to winning the hearts. And as you go back to the offices, what you may see after going to a very inspirational conference like this, you may see some skeptics where people don't necessarily believe that winning the hearts is critical. And what I'd like to talk about is some of the data and the facts that you can help win over the hearts of the skeptics. So what do we see as a global HR engagement consultant as some of the key issues in terms of the link between employee engagement, winning the hearts, with the business results? So first of all, we believe every employee can be motivated, energized, and highly productive. And we actually believe each one of those pieces is important. The motivation, and how you actually display that motivation through energy, as well as then the link to productivity. And our engagement model is looking at a number of engagement drivers, things such as quality of life, the work, the job itself, people, opportunities, total rewards, and company practices, and then measuring the connection between how we define engagement, which is the 3 S's. So first of all, say, which is how do you talk about your organization? Are you a net promoter of your organization? Are you a real advocate of your organization? The stay is your prediction of staying in the organization. Am I committed to be in this organization over the next several years? And then the last S, the strive, is the level of discretionary effort. So do I go above and beyond the job itself to deliver? And as we look at the connection there, we've shown very strong correlations to talent outcomes such as retention and productivity, operational outcomes. Companies that have higher levels of engagement have lower amounts of accidents and improved safety. We also see a very strong link, and we're going to talk about the OB example, to customer satisfaction, and that companies with high levels of employee engagement display higher levels of company satisfaction, and then finally to financials, and particularly to sales growth, to the degree that the company is growing faster than its competitors. In terms of our database, we do engagement studies globally. I was just last week in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and Dubai, where engagement is becoming very important. Even in Saudi Arabia, that's seen as a need for improving engagement within the workforce. But we have over 18 million people in our database, and we also have a Russian database. So we are one of the firms that actually has a subset of data, over 200,000 employees within Russia, that we survey each year. And then if we look at overall engagement levels, we see that there was some decline in engagement during the recession, during the economic downturn, but then it's ticked back up. But we do see it stabilizing, and some regions actually decreasing. This looks at levels of engagement between different regions, where the highest levels of engagement we actually see in Latin America, and Europe being one of the lower levels of engagement. But one of the challenges that companies have now is how can they get engagement levels that are stabilized or in some cases decreasing and improve those. Just to give you a quick idea around engagement in Latin America, at this type of conference, we sponsor a Best Employer Conference, and when we announce the best employers, this was in Brazil, you have whole management teams coming up on stage and dancing and singing. They're so excited by the fact that they've helped create an environment of very high levels of engagement. While we obviously see companies that have high levels of engagement, there's still significant issues in terms of large groups of people that are not engaged. In fact, 4 out of 10 employees are not engaged, and 2 out of 10 are actively disengaged. And what we see many companies focus on is moving the people that are moderately engaged to the highest levels of highly engaged, because these are the people that are the real advocates for your organization. These are the people that are out there talking to their friends, that are interacting well with customers, that are really driving innovation. So the more of that group, you're going to get a disproportionate benefit of having a high percentage of people that are at that top category. And then also the actively disengaged. These people that have more or less checked out of the organization, have said, it doesn't matter, I am here just for the job, for the pay, nothing else. And these are also the people, when it comes to everything from financial fraud and problems with company reputation, that are most, where you've got the most issues. So this gives you an overall view of different levels of engagement. But engagement does differ also within Europe. So if you look at some of our data for Russia, we see the current levels of engagement of 59%, with a slight uptick from the prior year. And we also see best employers in Russia being significantly higher. So while this is the average, we do see companies that are in the 80% of engagement. One thing I think that's interesting to note is the engagement life cycle. That this looks at how employee levels of engagement, this is specific to Russia, how that varies over their tenure within the company. So the highest levels of engagement where someone's first hired, when they're first joining an organization and are excited about being there, but we see its significant decline over time. In fact, the average level of engagement when someone starts at 77%, and it drops down to 54%. So one of the key questions is, what can we do to try to keep that high level of engagement so that people are not experiencing that decline? And we see the best employers have some success at that. They start actually with more engaged people at 91%, and they maintain that fairly high, and actually able to, for people that are 10 years or more of service, actually have 81% engagement. So, this life cycle in terms of employee engagement from when someone starts as they continue to work in their career is something you can definitely manage and do things to support that. That there will be some dip, but then the pickup from the dip. One of the questions we often get from clients is, what do you typically see from survey to survey? Many of our clients do surveys every year, and they want to know what kind of engagement levels how can they impact it? Let's say you're at the global average of 59% in Russia. What kind of change can you see year by year? We see most companies, it's only 1% to 2% change, either up or down every year, because it's a hard number to change. I mean, people have points of view, and it takes a lot of work to really change those engagement drivers, as well as the say, stay, strive components of it. But we do see a percentage, it's 11% of the companies that see a very significant uptick in engagement, 14% increase, or one standard deviation increase in engagement. And the question is, we call these the engagement outliers. These are companies that have seen significant increases in engagement, and OB is definitely one of those. And also companies that have very high levels of engagement that are still able to increase the levels of engagement. So what are some of the keys to that? So we've put down what we see as some of the keys in terms of our research. The first one is enable first, which means many times engagement is negatively impacted by having things at work that just are frustrating for people, frustrating processes, technology that doesn't work, having some of the basics around the work environment just not effective. So you've got to make people create an environment in which people can do their work effectively. I know in some industries it's harder than others, but that's key. The second one, engagement's not just a survey score. It's not just a number. It's actually something that you're acting upon and doing something. And the go big is identify a few highly visible projects and things you can do where people will see it. It could be launching a new career development program. It could be really starting to get leadership actively out talking to people and conversing and having dialogue. But think about 2 or 3 things that will really make an impact based on your engagement drivers. The fourth one is all about me. engagement's an individual piece, and you have to ask people, and this is what companies do, is what are the things that currently engage you, and what are things that disengage you as an individual employee, and as a manager, what can I help do to manage or to reduce some of the things that are disengaging and to increase some of the things about your work that you like the most. So that's really about the employee-manager relationship. Great leaders, it's really, in almost every organization that we've seen, it's really a very, very few exceptions, it does start with leadership. In some cases, like the Obi example, the leader gets it up front. In other cases, they need a little convincing why it's important and what you need to do to improve, but leadership is important. And the last question is, engage in what? Every company has something different that you want to engage in. You know, if you're in a retailer, it's probably the engagement is about the satisfaction that you're able to display to your customers. If you're a high-tech company, it's about the ability to innovate and see things that you work on to be successful. So I think that's one of the key things we suggest clients look at is what are the unique differentiators in your organization that you want people to engage in? And how that's different from other companies, and then how do you make sure you're attracting the people that are engaged in those areas and maintaining that level of engagement. I mentioned up front that I'd give you a few facts and figures that you can take back with you and show your senior management to say, this is why winning the hearts matters. This is why engagement matters. So we've done this research across our entire database, but one of the key things that we see is that companies that do significantly better in engagement, the biggest causal relationship, it's not even a correlation, it's a causal relationship, is to future sales growth. So companies that are able to increase engagement, in this case 10%, see on average a $200 million jump in sales. So significant sales growth versus their industry. It's obviously looked at by industry, but and it's intuitive that if you've got people that are excited about what they're doing or feeling like they're working for a company, an environment that's compelling, enjoy working with their coworkers, they're going to be thinking about new ideas, innovation, they're going to be thinking about how they can better serve customers, they're going to be collaborating more, which will absolutely lead to sales growth. And then the other fact that I want to provide is that companies that are in the top quartile of engagement, so, and this is anywhere at 72% or higher. Our global average for best employers is 79%. Those companies that are in that top quartile have a total shareholders return, so TSR, which is really looking at the how well your stock is appreciating versus the market, and looking at the appreciation in value that your shareholders receive, that's 50% higher than the average in the industry. So some very compelling. I mean, you go back to your CEO and say, listen, if we focus on engagement, we can actually have a 50% higher return to our shareholders than the average company. I think that your CEO, he or she, will absolutely listen. And as we think about what the key component, and my colleague Edward Stanek will be talking more about this tomorrow in a session called Engaging Leaders, we really believe it starts from the top. As I said, sometimes leaders naturally get it, other times they need to be convinced, but it really does need to start. You know, here's some quotes. We just hired a new CEO. He's very big on engagement, the people side of the business, and he's really focused on how we can develop leaders and drive engagement. That leaders need to hold people accountable for improving engagement, for action planning and making sure that there is the right steps in place to drive higher levels of engagement, and it has to be seen as something that's important to the business. The other thing that's interesting is when you're hiring people, the best companies actually assess people and think about, are they going to be engaged in this environment? Also, are they engaging leaders? If you look at the best companies, the best employers that with the highest levels of engagement, they have leaders that are not just technically proficient, but are very good about connecting with people, having dialogues, career discussions, and motivating. So assessing, thinking about how you select leaders and making sure that you include this level of a leader that's engaging, we would say is a key piece. So at this point, what I'd like to do is move into the OB case study. So we've worked extensively with OB over a number of years. We have a number of large retail clients. We also work with Walmart and a few of the largest retailers. And retail is actually interesting because you can see a very, very strong connection between engagement and customer satisfaction, as well as sales growth. And in some cases, we've even seen a very strong connection to the improvement of product that's paid for. So less losses. If you've got people that are engaged, there's going to be less of the products that actually leave the store without being paid for. So it's clearly an imperative within retail, and OB has been a prime example of a company where there was there's a little bit of background in terms of what they've done. It's a do-yourself DIY retailer within the home improvement space. It's had double-digit growth and over 50 million visitors in 2012. And it's been over 10 years in Russia. And it was in 2009, they had a new CEO came over who's actually spent quite a bit of time in many different markets, including in Asia and China, and he saw some of the things that he had seen work effectively in other markets he wanted to apply to the Russian business, and he was able to then launch a very active employee engagement effort that has resulted in quite some strong success. So their overall goal is to be one of the best DIY retailers in Russia and the best employer, not just in retail actually, across the Russian market, and comparable to best employers anywhere in the world. And the recognition was that it was important to, first of all, assess engagement. So the first step was surveying and actually doing assessment of engagement. The second step that we saw was managers being very committed to both communicating, because we would say one of the things that's you have to be careful with is not doing the survey and not communicating the results, because that actually will decrease levels of engagement, because then people will become very skeptical. So as he came on board and worked with his management team, it was about both measuring engagement levels and then making sure there was communications and very specific action plans that were put in place to improve engagement. And the other thing is a recognition is that it will take time to improve engagement. It doesn't happen one year. You need some patience to see the continual progress. So this is looking at OB in Russia in 2013. We've seen a continual increase in engagement. And we've also, if you look at all the way on this side, one of the things that's critical is very high scores for senior leadership and line managers, that they saw that as a key. Senior leaders modeling the behaviors they're looking for, and line managers actually the ones who are conveying the engagement levels and making sure that employees within the stores are actively seeing the support and coaching and development. Because one of the things about retail is that it tends to have a fairly high turnover of employees. So the role of the manager is even more important, because you're both selecting people, you're coaching and developing people, and you're the one that is really helping them best serve the customer. So a lot of focus on that. And then give you an idea of the results, what they've seen in terms of improvements of engagement have been that, not quite sure where that went, but it was ongoing improvement in both sales as well as profitability. And they've had the success of seeing 20% increases in revenue. Obviously, some of that's opening new stores, but also a continual increase in profitability. And Ian and the senior management team really puts that up to having managers that think about engagement as being one of their key success factors, as well as employees that see OB as being an organization that really treats people well, hires good people, and supports them as they grow and develop in the organization. So this gives you an overview of the OB story. We think it's quite, it's one where you've got a very strong connection between employee engagement and leadership style of defining engagement and defining the importance with the business results.